I now realize how dumb it was to shave before I did a part 2 to this reaction. So some things we can expect in Oversimplified's Napoleonic Wars Part 2 is a big cold battle in Russia, a prison break possibly from Napoleon after he got captured the first time, then him being exiled again, which is probably going to be depressing. You know how when people like read the book before they've seen the movie? That's what I feel like right now. I've read the book and now I'm excited to see how the movie's going to interpret it.
After the Third and Fourth Coalition Wars, Napoleon had decisively defeated all 3 of his main rivals.
So it's going to be like 7?
And he was now undoubtedly the master
Look at that.
of Europe.
It's beautiful.
After the Battle of Friedland, his enemies sued for peace, and they all met on a raft on a river for negotiations. They had been fighting for the past 4 years, but now Napoleon and Alexander surprisingly got along like a house on fire. They laughed together. They chatted long into the night.
Hey, why is he short
They
there?
kissed. The two
Whoa!
had a lot of mutual respect.
Whoa! You can't just skip over that. That's an important part of the lore. This was actually a painting done too, so this must have took the artists like weeks to complete. We had people shipping back in history too. I mean, I don't know about you, but I stan Alexander and Napoleon. Hashtag goals.
They kissed.
Whatever.
The two had a lot of mutual respect.
There's the
Napoleon
baguette.
even
I
told
was waiting
his
for the
wife
baguette in the
that
first
if
one.
Alexander were a woman, I would make him my mistress. Kind of a weird thing to say to your wife, Napoleon. In the end, they came to an amicable agreement.
I guess I should have waited the extra couple seconds to see the added lore. I've never heard of this before. I feel like this changes, like, everything.
Russia would lose barely any land, and in return, they'd join France against the UK and invade Sweden. Win-win. On the other hand, Frederick William III was
I love the
sidelined,
Adidas.
and Prussia lost an enormous amount of territory to French client states. Only the UK remained as the last major threat to Napoleon, and they continued to be a big thorn in his side, constantly funding his enemies and using their powerful navy to wreak havoc on French trade and overseas colonies.
That's the interesting thing is like, how would Russia really help them against Britain? I don't know how big the Russian navy was, but I still don't think it's going to be able to overmatch what the British had. I guess if all of these countries put all of their ships together, maybe they'd have a chance.
But what could Napoleon do? The British were safe across the channel. Well, he said, if I can't fight you with guns, I'll fight you with money. Earlier in 1806, Napoleon had announced the Continental System, a total shutoff of the UK from continental trade.
Nice big
no
old
one in Europe was to trade with
tariff.
Britain, and Napoleon hoped that by hitting their economy, he could force them to negotiate.
That's pretty smart. I didn't know they was doing it back then.
Take a hit, and they responded in their typical fashion by going to Copenhagen and blowing a bunch of stuff up.
Why am I surprised to hear that, like, we were doing those tactics even back in the day, like sanctioning countries, destroying their economy? I'm sure we've been doing that for a while.
But in general, the British managed to stay afloat by simply increasing their trade with other parts of the world. Many neutral countries found themselves stuck between a rock and a hard place, as the two European superpowers demanded they cease trade with the enemy. Hey, America, you better not trade with the French, or else I'll come burn down the White House. What?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
this is gonna wreck my economy.
That's about to
I need
happen.
To start saving money. How the heck am I gonna start saving money? Yeah, that's right. You know where this is going. Do you shopping in
You got
store,
me again.
making peace with the Russians, a continental blockade, and blowing up Copenhagen? Sick of being blown up for doing almost nothing.
We're about to also get into the War of 1812,
officially sided with
which
France.
is something I should have mentioned at the very beginning.
Blockade had the biggest effect on continental Europe, who were now cut off from a major trading partner, one that controlled the seas and held a rich, growing empire. And a lot of countries didn't fully comply. Portugal, a traditional British ally, refused to take part. No problem. Napoleon sent an army and invaded. But it wasn't just Portugal. Many of Napoleon's allies were also suspect. Your Majesty.
There's the war for Spain too. Oh, there it is.
Blockade. Spain? Why not? Well, it appears they've been trying to find a way out of being your ally since they lost their fleet at Trafalgar. What is with these people? It's almost like everyone's only pretending to be my ally because they know otherwise I'd beat them up. Do I even have any real friends? Are you my friend, Pierre? Say yes or I'll slap you. Napoleon had come to mistrust his ally to the south.
That's a good way to make
and
friends.
In particular, Napoleon thought the Spanish royal family were an incompetent mess. All right.
Well, was this when they were still the Habsburgs? Because isn't that kind of the case? They were incompetent? Oh, wait, no, this was way after the Habsburgs. My bad. I don't know. It's just kind of crazy to me that they were like homies for so long, and then they decided, yeah, we're not going to be cool anymore.
You've got to get it together. How can I trust you when all you do is go hunting? Meanwhile, you let this ambitious nobody who dislikes me run the country. And you seem to be the only person in the universe who doesn't realize he's boinking your wife. And what's worse, who the heck are you? I'm the king's son. I just overthrew my dad.
Oh, nice.
Actually, now I'm the king.
Is he also going to boink his wife?
You people are the biggest cluster of shameless, narcissistic idiots and all around just the worst people I've ever met. Here, have a Kid's Choice Award. French forces, many having conveniently already entered Spain to invade Portugal,
yep, here we go.
occupied Spanish forts, and Napoleon invited the
What a
Spanish
boss
royals
move.
to France to help mediate their differences. All right, we're here
this
with
Dr.
the royal
Phil?
family of Spain. So,
It is.
Fernando, you've been accused of plotting against your father and vying for the Spanish throne. What do you have to say for yourself? Well, Napoleon, I just think great. Well, I've got the
Please
test
don't
results right
do a
here.
cash me outside joke.
Fernando, in the case of the Spanish throne, you are not the king.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, this
And
is Maury.
Carlos, you are also not the king. I'm the king.
Can't argue with that.
Actually,
How have they never done that before on like a show like Jerry Springer? Like he just goes through all the dudes. You're not the father. You're not the father. He has like one more letter he pulls out. I'm the father. I mean, that show is so fake. You would think they would do that.
king. Actually, Napoleon made his brother the king, but for all intents and purposes, Spain was now his puppet. He expected the Spanish people to be over the moon at the removal of
And
their unpopular
Portugal,
royal family.
maybe?
Imagine his surprise when it turned out that people
they-
don't really like to be subjugated by a foreign power, least of all one who had previously attacked the Catholic Church. And so the people of Spain revolted. Brutal fighting.
Yeah,
broke
this
out
was pretty
as
bad.
bands of armed Spaniards ambushed French troops across
If
the
I
kingdom,
remember
and
correctly, this was
vicious
bloody.
atrocities were
Yeah.
committed on both sides. In addition to fighting the regular Spanish and Portuguese forces, the French had to contend with tens of
This
thousands
really
of
messed up
guerrilla
Napoleon's
fighters
whole
throughout the
plan.
Spanish countryside. The British even took the opportunity to land an army led by the future Duke of Wellington. And now, British forces were defeating French
D-Day,
ones
but
on land.
in
Napoleon
Portugal?
briefly went to Spain in person, and he did drive back the Allied armies. But before long, his attention was needed elsewhere.
Russia?
The whole thing became a
wonder.
nightmare for the emperor. He excelled at traditional warfare, but this was something more akin to Napoleon's Vietnam. The whole conflict would keep hundreds
Napoleon's
of thousands of French
Vietnam.
soldiers
I love that. We already have a Russia Vietnam. I mean, there's two places, Afghanistan and Finland. I mean, America's Vietnam is Vietnam. France's Vietnam is Spain. I can just smell the meme potential in that one.
resources bogged down for years. Napoleon was never able to break the will of the Spanish people, and this problem weakened his position in Europe.
People give like Spain a lot of crap for like not doing much after the 1700s, but they were a pretty big factor in stopping Napoleon.
Francis, want to go to war with Napoleon again? Oh, I don't know, Britain. He's already whomped me 3 times. I'll give you £1 billion. Well, okay.
Imagine-
Seeing that Napoleon was now caught up in Spain.
You
and
took
with some
3
British
L's
funding,
and you're gonna do it
decided
again?
maybe, just maybe, this time they'd have a chance. So did they? No.
Yeah.
Napoleon defeated
I
them
didn't think
in
so.
just 4 months.
Jeez.
It was quick, but it wasn't exactly easy. The Austrians had been watching Napoleon and learning, and they had made some reforms. While Napoleon, after years of war, was increasingly having to rely on inexperienced conscripts. So this time, the Austrians gave him a run
Other
for
dudes
his money.
died.
The Fifth Coalition saw some of the bloodiest battles to date, including Napoleon's first major defeat. And when he did finally defeat the Austrians at the Battle of Wagram, it was a very costly victory.
Dang! Yeah, you could barely call that a win. That's pretty bad on both sides.
Still, Napoleon had yet again
Oh,
kicked
yeah.
Francis's butt.
This is
and
my
as part
favorite
of the peace
part.
terms, Austria lost a bunch more land. Not long after, however, Napoleon and Francis came to another agreement. It was decided that Napoleon would marry Francis's young daughter. But wait, doesn't Napoleon already have a wife? Well, yes, he did.
What about
Josephine and Napoleon
second
had become
wife?
quite fond of one another. But now that Napoleon was playing the monarch game, he needed a male heir, and his aging wife wasn't giving him one. So it was out with the old and in with the new. At least he didn't behead anyone.
That's
For Austria,
good reference. Could have been worse, girl. Could have been worse. That's all I'm saying.
they felt that if Napoleon was going to keep on winning, they may as well be on his side. So through the marriage, Napoleon got an alliance with Austria and a beautiful baby potato. Between the failing blockade against Britain, the ongoing war in Spain, and now his recent struggles in Austria, cracks in Napoleon's invincibility were beginning to show. But still, look at this map. So blue.
It is beautiful.
So beautiful. Even Sweden, after being pulverized by Russia, overthrew their king, and after an interesting chain of events, ended up putting one of Napoleon's own marshals in charge.
I keep wondering when the big Swedish IKEA empire was going on. That Great Northern War, when was that? Oh wow, completely ignore that I said that. That was like 100 years before that. I kept wondering like, wait, isn't Sweden like crazy big at this time? Well, that's embarrassing.
Marshal Bernadotte took the name Karl Johan and became Crown Prince of Sweden after agreeing to join Napoleon's continental system. For now, Sweden was Team France.
Wow.
Napoleon was on top of the world. He had won an endless string of victories. All he had to do now was sit back and not make any major miscalculations that could completely turn the tide of war. So let's see what comes next.
What? Yeah, Russia. There it is.
France's alliance with Russia was a terrifying prospect. Together, the two could have been unstoppable, but unfortunately, the alliance didn't last.
They
the
were
Russians
lovers.
Felt they weren't getting a fair deal.
Can't stop
Napoleon's
lovers.
Duchy of Warsaw, right on their doorstep, was a bit of an insult. And then
I don't know if
their
they were
economy
lovers.
began to tank because of Napoleon's British blockade. And eventually, they began to open up trade. Your Majesty, it seems Alexander is no longer abiding by the continental system and has begun trading with the British. Alexander? But he kissed me. He kissed you? You wouldn't get it, Pierre. No one would ever kiss you. The security of Napoleon's empire depended on removing the
Napoleon could have kissed him. He was available.
British threat, and he wasn't happy with Russia's backdoor shenanigans. And so in 1812, Napoleon decided to go to war. He gathered together the most massive army Europe had ever...
Can you really blame him, though? I mean, the dude was taking dub after dub. He wasn't losing at all. Someone slightly, you know, makes him a little aggravated, so he thinks he's gonna go over there and slap him around. I feel like anyone was gonna make that same mistake. Like, you know, your confidence would be through the roof. Oh, I'm just gonna easily invade Russia because they're being stupid and I don't like them. We don't even know what a loss is. We're just gonna go in and out, 20-minute adventure.
He gathered together the most massive army Europe had ever seen, made up of troops from
Wow.
every corner of his empire.
500,000.
And he prepared to invade. Okay, it looks like Napoleon's coming for us. Generals, I need ideas.
Burn
We could
down
stand
the
and fight.
towns.
No, that's stupid. You're stupid. We could run away.
And burn down the towns.
You're a star. You'll remember Napoleon's tactics relied on astonishing speed to outmaneuver his enemy and force a quick, decisive battle. Well, I've got two words for you. Scorched earth.
There it is.
If his opponent retreated while scorching the earth, his men
Yeah.
couldn't live off the land. And if his men couldn't live off the land, he needed his supply trains. And if he needed his supply trains, he couldn't move quickly. And if he couldn't move quickly, he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy. And if he couldn't outmaneuver his enemy, I think you get the point.
It's a pretty great strategy. Like, why not just nuke your own land? Like, that'd be the 21st century version of doing that.
Napoleon launched his invasion and hoped for a quick battle, but all he could do was try to catch the retreating
Oh, I love the
Russians
counter.
while moving deeper and
The
deeper
casualty
into hostile
counter up there.
territory. As he went, the horribly hot summer devastated his army. His men died of
Really?
heat, exhaustion, and disease.
What?
Supplies
You don't hear about
began
the
to run out,
summer.
and his men began to starve. Many deserted, and still the Russians continued to retreat. Numerous times
Wow.
Napoleon considered turning back, but that little voice in his head kept on telling him, keep going, just a little further. And don't worry, you're definitely average height for the time. He nearly cut the Russians at Smolensk.
That's what I
but
tell
it was his
myself too.
birthday, so he had a party instead. When he finally reached Moscow, he predicted the Russians wouldn't be willing to give up such a historic and holy city without a fight. And he was right. The Russians finally
Wow.
turned to face him for the single deadliest day of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Borodino. The Russians fought
And this is only
valiantly,
September.
And as he got older, Napoleon's battle tactics seemed to become a little less refined and a little more run straight at the enemy.
Wasn't
try not to die.
really
He launched
winter
a full
yet.
frontal assault at the Russian defenses, and as a result, the death toll was colossal. The Russians eventually decided to retreat, leaving Moscow to fall into Napoleon's hands. Quick, the French are taking the city.
Really?
Release all these prisoners immediately and tell them to burn it to the ground.
Oh, that's smart.
Well, well, Jimmy the arsonist, you are not going to believe you. Moscow went up in flames, and as Napoleon...
Man, could you imagine waking up and being that guy, getting put into prison for doing this thing? Now they release you and they need you to do the same exact thing. That's like legit the 1800s version of like a Suicide Squad.
It became very clear his army wouldn't be able to stay there very long. But he had just defeated the Russian army and taken their most beloved city. In his mind, he had won. So he sent Tsar Alexander in St. Petersburg a letter. Your Imperial Majesty, Napoleon requests your surrender. How shall I respond? You shan't, Dmitri.
Is that person Slav squatting?
Ever.
Oh, they're all Slav squatting. I'm glad that you're using such historic cultural icons here.
But, Your Majesty, it will be winter soon. The French forces
Heels
are stuck
on the ground.
500
That's
miles
very
into Russian
important.
territory with dwindling supplies. If we don't say anything, well, then they'll all die. Oh! After waiting for a response for about a month, the first snow of winter began to fall, and
Ooh.
Napoleon sensed the catastrophe that was about to unfold. He decided their only choice now
Was to run
get
back?
out. And that's when it happened. It got cold. Stupid cold. His glorious invasion had just become a race for survival, as the Russians realized the French were...
Okay, what's interesting though is that a majority of the troops were not taken out by the winter. I mean, I'm sure the winter is what's going to give you the death blow, give Napoleon the death blow. But he lost like 500,000 troops just through the summer and through all the battles getting to Moscow.
Were fleeing for their lives. They began
So
to
maybe
close in
the
on their
memes
supply line. Men froze to death.
weren't
Their
always
horses
correct.
as well. There was starvation and disease. The injured and dying could only be left by the side of the road, as it was too slow to try to carry them. And all along the way, the dreaded Russian Cossacks stalked the bleeding French army, and every now and then swept in for a quick attack. Napoleon, fearing capture, kept a vial of poison around his neck. At one point, the Russian armies nearly trapped him against the Berezina River, but a little Napoleon cleverness gave him the old Jeffrey juke, tricking them into thinking he was going south and then escaping across rapidly built pontoon bridges to the north. When the Russians realized where he was and began to close in, the French burned the bridges before everyone could cross.
Oh, that's pretty
Hundreds drowned, and thousands were captured. At this point, Napoleon got wind of plots against him forming in Paris, so he abandoned his men and went back to France. The remaining French stragglers made it across the border. It's been estimated over 600,000 men went into Russia. Less than 100,000 returned.
Damn.
Napoleon was now
What a
in
disaster.
very precarious situation.
And then you had this whole Spain
His army
thing still going
had
on.
just been obliterated, and the other European leaders smelled blood. Here was an opportunity to take advantage of a weakened Napoleon, regain territory and influence.
And then who knows what was going on with the UK? I mean, well, I don't really know if there was a whole lot of... I mean, I'm sure they couldn't, like, sail across the sea. Probably some ships maybe still being blown up. I don't know. All while that was happening.
Liberate Europe from his dirty French paws. And so, they began to turn. Prussia soon broke their alliance and switched sides, while Austria declared neutrality. Even Sweden, led by one of Napoleon's old marshals, joined the Allies, partly due to Napoleon's earlier invasion of Swedish Pomerania. The War of the Sixth Coalition had begun.
We have this
The
one and one
coalition
more.
forces had been reforming their armies, and they were now much better. And the UK had also significantly amped up its financial aid to its continental allies. Their armies quickly advanced through Poland and into Germany. In Paris, Napoleon was understandably freaking out. He needed
gonna
to
get
put together
captured.
a new army fast, and he called up over 100,000 new conscripts, mostly teenagers.
But they had no idea what they were
He also put his
doing.
factories into overdrive.
I thought we were going to see a TikTok joke there. They're just like...
And he was like, you, make more rifles. You, build new cannons. You, make more horses. I don't make horses. Then who makes horses? Horses make horses. Explain how. Well, when a daddy horse and a mommy horse love each other very much. Yes, go on. Well, then the daddy horse... I'm sorry, Napoleon. You're 43. I thought you'd know this stuff. Don't touch me. I'm gonna be sick. As it turned
That would explain why he wasn't getting a male heir from his first wife.
out, Napoleon's lack of horses would take the biggest toll on his army, since his tactics relied on speed, maneuverability, and destruction. When he took the fight to the Allies in 1813, he did defeat them and sent them running. But lacking cavalry, he was unable to effectively pursue and destroy. He needed horses. For the Allies,
They need to start
defeated in battle
mating.
by a man whose army was now full of inexperienced conscripts was concerning. So both sides were like, hold up, time out. The Allies were somewhat cornered, and had Napoleon kept going, it's possible he could have won. But instead he agreed to a brief truce with the Austrians mediating between the two sides. When Austria demanded Napoleon make major concessions, Napoleon told them to shove it. Having had their terms rejected, Austria felt now they
How?
were justified in saying, well, we tried.
How Austria do this when, like, Austria married off that one chick to Napoleon? Doesn't that go against the whole, like, royal code?
Okay, everyone, look at us. The boys are back together, but Napoleon is still dangerous, so we need a plan.
Boys are back
Any
in town.
ideas? Ooh, I know. No, forget it. That's stupid. Oh, no. I've got it! When he approaches, we run away. Genius.
Who
He's a
would have
genius.
guessed?
The plan was as follows. Wherever
That's all you had to do with
advanced,
Napoleon.
whoever he advanced on,
All you had to do to defeat Napoleon is just run away. I can see why it took them so many coalitions to figure that out, but it's such a smart strategy.
would avoid battle, allowing the others to sweep in from the sides and attack the French marshals guarding his flanks.
Encircled.
Essentially, the plan was, don't try to fight Napoleon. And this plan worked tremendously. The Allies scored a number of victories that saw Napoleon move back to the city of Leipzig, where he would make one last major stand as the Allied armies converged in on him from all sides. The stage was set for the biggest and bloodiest battle of the Napoleonic Wars, the Battle of Leipzig. Almost 500,000 troops from over a dozen nations stretched across the battlefield. The French found themselves fighting on all sides for 4 days against the Austrians, Prussians, Swedes, and Russians. It's no
Where the
wonder
British
this
at?
battle is also sometimes referred to as the Battle of the Nations. The French fought ferociously, but ultimately were no match for the coordinated efforts of the coalition. At one point, in the midst of battle, Saxon troops allied with the French had a team huddle and were like, hey guys, I'm pretty sure the French are losing. Let's switch sides. And so they did. When it became clear that Napoleon couldn't win,
Smart.
he ordered a retreat across the only...
Good old Italian strats there. They're implementing everything at this point. Wait, is this 1812? Was the British out there doing this stuff with the US? War of 1812 between the US versus the Canadas and the UK. That happened between 1812 and 1815. This coalition started in 1813, ended in 1814. So yeah, the British might have been a little distracted in North America. But what's most interesting to me is to think about all the Americans, including myself, that think that that thing was like such a big deal. Like all you gotta do is watch this video and it'll show you exactly how the UK probably must have felt. Like everything in that other continent, it was just a side mission. This was the main storyline for them. They didn't care about anything else.
Before everyone's crossed, after. You got that? Yes, Colonel, I'm not 5. I can comprehend time. Good. Wait, did he say before?
He's
or
gonna blow up the
after?
bridge in front with all.
Well, fortune favors the bold. The bridge was blown early, and 30,000 French troops were stranded and captured.
That's
A
so annoying.
disaster.
And
with that, the dominoes
I've been
were beginning
pissed.
to come crashing down on Napoleon. In the south, an army under the British Duke of Wellington had been pushing the French out of Spain for the
Such
past
a
few
simple
years,
mistake.
and were now crossing into France.
Oh, there they go.
Austrian armies
So
had
they were
pushed
doing
into
something.
Italy,
They were
while
doing stuff in
Napoleon's old
Iberia.
flamboyant cavalry commander, Murat, who Napoleon had made king of Naples, decided to switch sides.
Damn.
German states
Oh,
remained
it is in
resentful
Italy.
After years under Napoleon's thumb.
So, sorry, Italy. But this is just more evidence against you. Even Naples was switching sides. You have Napoleonic Wars, World War I, World War II. That's why they always come out on top.
Turned against him, and the Confederation of the Rhine collapsed. Bernadotte invaded Denmark, and they were forced to join the coalition, while the Netherlands were liberated. You'd think Napoleon might have seen the
You're
writing on the wall,
screwed.
but he was Napoleon, and so instead, he prepared to keep fighting. As attitudes in Paris were already beginning to turn against him, he called up more conscripts to defend the exhausted nation. As for the Allies, they weren't sure exactly what they were aiming for here. A few peace offers.
Like, where are all these dudes coming from? Like, so many French have died, and it really hasn't been that long. Like, I don't think there's been enough of a generation to go by to resupply, because they were clearly doing some conscription that was scraping the barrel.
That may have let Napoleon keep his position, but the British kept throwing around even more money, and eventually, they all agreed that the ultimate aim was the deposition of Napoleon entirely.
I think that's
And so,
pretty much the only
Napoleon
thing you
embarked
can
on
do.
one of his most famous campaigns to defend the homeland. He was completely outnumbered, but the Allied armies had split up and spread out. His army was so small that he could move at lightning speed, and he used this to his advantage. In the famous 6 Days campaign against Prussian General Blücher, he attacked from all directions and defeated Blücher's forces 4 times, only suffering
How?
1/10 of the casualties he inflicted.
How is this dude so good? The video's not even over. He's about to do some more amazing stuff here, but like, I just wonder, how is he such a good military general? Yeah, he made a little mistake in Russia, but one mistake out of everything? He was ruling over all of Europe, so he must have been pretty good at leadership in general, not just through military means. Like, it's crazy we don't refer to this dude more often. Like, Skinny Mustache Man is the only historical figure that always gets brought up just in everyday context. I feel like Napoleon should be up there too, though, just in terms of like, not being bad, just his crazy famous historical figures.
The wall. Napoleon was still Napoleon. Then he turned south to take on Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia and enjoyed even more victories. However, Napoleon's problem was that he couldn't be everywhere at once, and wherever he wasn't, the Allies continued to push towards Paris. He made one last-ditch attempt at moving in behind the enemy lines and cutting off their communications, but Paris was in disarray, and the people were sick of war. One ambitious and slightly treacherous politician sent the Allied armies a letter basically saying, "Hey guys, come on in." And so, they did. The city's defenders surrendered, and as the Allied leaders entered Paris, the people cheered them as bringers of peace. Paris had fallen. Quick, marshals, gather your men. We're gonna launch an assault on Paris. Where are my marshals? They all left and told me to give you this note.
They done. Bruh.
Napoleon's marshals had realized what
Bruh.
he hadn't. It was over, and they insisted all that was left now, for the good of France, was for him to abdicate. And without the support of his army, Napoleon had no choice. He hoped his son could take his place, but it was decided instead to restore the old Bourbon monarchy. Old King Louis XVI's brother would become the King of France.
Bourbon
It was almost
France
like
is
the
back.
French Revolution had
We chopped off all those heads for this? Yeah, French Revolution meant nothing now.
never even happened. But what will we do with Napoleon? We can't have a hyperactive 44-year-old minister.
Oh man, that must have pissed so many people. No wonder they all accepted him with open arms when he came back.
Around reigniting
Oh, sorry, spoiler alert.
revolutionary ideals and plotting his return. Well, why don't we send him, I don't know, there. The location chosen for Napoleon's exile was the small island of Elba, just off the coast of Italy. Napoleon was to rule over the island.
I feel like
and
that's
even got
so
to keep
random.
the title, Emperor of Elba. The Allies must have been in stitches when they came up with that. When he learned what his fate was to be, he drank the poison he had been keeping around his neck. But it had gone out of date, so instead of a quick and painless death, he got a painful stummy-wummy instead. Before he left France, he addressed his old...
Bruh gave up, man. How could you give up? You still get to be the king of an island. I know it's, you know, not the greatest, but who would give up after being king of an island? You could have done a world conquest with Alba, same thing.
making an emotional speech that ended with him kissing their flag. And off he went.
Man,
to
he was
exile.
kissing a lot.
The deal that was given to him was actually quite generous. His family were given titles, he was to receive a state pension from France, and he was able to receive many distinguished visitors, all eager to come and meet the famed emperor.
Damn.
And he ruled over Elba well, improving infrastructure and introducing many
See?
legal and social reforms
Like,
aimed at improving life on
He
the
wasn't
island.
just good at
And
military, he
Napoleon
was good at
just
so
coming
many
in to check on how
things.
it's all Holy smokes! But it wasn't all good. For one thing, he learned of the death of his first wife, Josephine, and was deeply saddened.
Oh, wow,
was
he cared
forbidden
about
from
her?
seeing his son and current wife.
Didn't
And in
seem like he
Austria,
cared about her.
Emperor Francis had ordered a local count to seduce her, so she would forget about Napoleon. Then, the new King Louis XVIII refused to give Napoleon his agreed pension. He was under constant threat of assassination, and there were even rumors that the Allies were thinking of relocating him somewhere even more remote. But the biggest problem was that Napoleon was once the master of Europe. He had lived a thrilling life of adventure, fame, and glory. Now, he found himself on a tiny island in the Mediterranean, and he was bored. Wouldn't it be nice if he could somehow return to France and reclaim his throne?
It's crazy that they didn't just, like, chop his head off. Like, why would they allow this dude to be around? After he took out so many other Europeans, like, he caused so much chaos, the fact they even let him live is kind of crazy.
Hey, Napoleon, want to go back to France and reclaim your throne? I would, Pierre. But how? Well, I was thinking we could just take this boat. Will that work? Surprisingly, yes.
Boats work?
Pierre, remember when I
Wow.
told you no one would ever kiss you? Yes, I...
It's happening!
Well, pucker up, boyo.
It happened!
Yay. When Napoleon left Elba,
He deserves
it wasn't
it.
really the daring escape you might think. He basically had kind of a leaving ceremony, hopped on a ship, and sailed back to France. He brought with him an
It
army
wasn't this
of about
cool
1,000
prison
men,
break
and
escape.
he began his journey to Paris. However,
I always imagined it
in
like
Paris,
that.
There was now a new king, and at first, the people largely accepted him because the last few years of war under Napoleon had brought immense death and economic suffering.
Oh, wow, so they were
That's
okay with
right.
him. I actually thought the opposite. I thought the French would immediately be like, now screw this guy. But yeah, having like decades of oofing would be bad.
Is back, baby. Divine right to rule. Don't worry, everyone. I know the economy is kaput, but I and my courtiers will withdraw into this palace, and we will definitely work as hard as we can to fix everything.
Oh. Oh, maybe they're not gonna like him.
Oh, yeah. That's why we got rid of the king. As the Bourbon monarchy began to look more and more like a return to the past, and the return of nobility
so
seemed hell-bent
first
on
they liked
regaining
him.
their lost privileges, the people weren't too happy. And so,
okay.
Napoleon hoped that his glorious return would be met with jubilation. In the end, the reaction was a little mixed, but many were happy to see their old emperor. Your Majesty, it seems that Napoleon is back and marching this way with 1,000 men. That guy? No problem. I have hundreds of thousands of men. Send them to arrest him. Your Majesty, it seems the thousands of men we sent to arrest Napoleon have all joined his side. Well, I'm off to Belgium.
Makes
if
sense.
you ever need a king again, be sure to let me know.
Military would
As
probably
Napoleon
like him. Apparently, all of that took place over the span of 11 months. I really feel like he would have had more French people on his side if he waited a little bit longer. You know, wait like 3, 4, 5 years. How old was Napoleon? Could he have made it? He was like in his mid-40s. He could have chilled on that island and really waited for like the French to think about the glory days. They would have fought harder probably too.
As Napoleon continued his journey, the king had sent battalions of men to stop him, but they largely comprised of Napoleon's old soldiers, many unhappy with King Louis's military reforms. And so, when ordered to arrest him, they simply couldn't do it. In one famous incident, the troops began to cry out, "Long live the Emperor." When Napoleon reached Paris, with King Louis having fled, he entered unopposed
Gone
to
to
reclaim
Belgium.
his throne. Napoleon was back from the dead. Okay, everyone, now that we've finally gotten rid of that guy, let's try to make sure something like this can never happen again. What's that doing there? Hey, fellow monarchs.
I wonder how they announced him. Like, how did they all find out about it? I don't think that's how it played out.
Mucho good boy and not start any wars.
Please.
But the Allied leaders were having none of it. They declared Napoleon an outlaw and the illegitimate ruler of France.
Wow,
Then
they were really afraid of that dude.
War, not
All
on
of them.
France, but on Napoleon himself. And when you have multiple empires declaring war on you as an individual, that's how you know you're a very naughty boy. The Allied powers began making plans to combine
How do
their
you declare
forces
war on a
and once
person?
again invade France. The most immediate threat to Napoleon were the British and Prussians hanging out in nearby Belgium. If Napoleon could knock them out quickly, maybe he could force the Allies to negotiate, and maybe he could hold on to his power. Together, the two armies to the north outnumbered him, so he made a plan to divide them and take them
At this
on
point, he's just
separately.
fighting for
Historians
survival, it
debate
looks
how
like.
much of a chance Napoleon
He just
had
wants
here,
to keep
but
leading
this
France.
Same strategy of dividing and conquering had worked for him multiple times. He marched north with 125,000 men and took on the Allies in a number of initial engagements, defeating the Prussians before turning to take on the British. But to Napoleon's dismay, miscommunication and hesitation among his marshals allowed both enemy armies to retreat.
They got
and
rusty.
Crucially, rather than fleeing east,
They
the
got
Prussians
rusty.
moved north, where they could
Maybe my plan of him waiting in Elba for like 5 years and then going back, maybe it wouldn't have worked because then they would have been even more rusty.
remain in contact with the British. Napoleon sent a force to hold off the Prussians as he moved in on the British, now holding a defensive position at Waterloo. Prussian General Blucher
Waterloo.
sent word that he would come to Wellington's
The
aid
infamous
if he
Waterloo.
could just hold off the French for long enough. Napoleon had to defeat Wellington before the Prussian army could arrive in force, and it was close. The British held the high ground and a number of key defensive buildings across the battlefield. After waiting some hours he didn't have for the ground to dry, Napoleon sent men to assault the Hougoumont farm, but the
Hougoumont?
British German garrison there held out. French Marshal Ney launched a number of
I know about this because of
miscalculated cavalry
Roblox.
charges at the British lines. The British formed defensive square formations, and they tore the French cavalry to shreds, while one guy chose the absolute worst time to go on a bender. The French did manage to capture a farmhouse directly in front of the British line, and from there, they unleashed artillery hellfire on the British square formations. And as Napoleon sent his Imperial Guard in to finish the British off,
Prussians.
a nervous Wellington knew his lines were at breaking point. But the Prussians had
Why
earlier
not do the
begun to
old strategy
arrive,
of run away?
and now they were arriving in large numbers. And after the British held out and sent the French Imperial Guard running, the French lines panicked, fearing they had been encircled, and
reverse
they
card.
began
They
to
ran
flee.
away.
The Battle of Waterloo was an Allied victory. And with that, Napoleon's hopes of returning to glory were vanquished. He knew
pretty much it.
he was defeated. He went to the British and said, "Can I please have a house near London?" And the British replied, "No." Instead, to make sure Napoleon was put away once and for all, they sent him to one of the most isolated and remote places they could think of, a tiny island in the Atlantic Ocean, St. Helena. Here, a deeply
So random.
isolated and depressed
Why?
Emperor Napoleon would live the remaining years of his life.
Aren't they building
His
an
house
airport
was a
there?
wooden
No?
bungalow, not exactly on par with the Tuileries Palace. Much to his frustration, his captors referred to him as General, rather than
watched
calling
that
him
video.
Emperor. His mail was censored, his visitors were vetted. There was almost no way he could escape such an isolated island. But just to be sure, he was guarded by 2,000 British soldiers and 2 ships that circled the island
Damn.
24 hours a day. He
Wow.
had once been the most powerful
Why
man
not
alive,
just kill
and
him?
images
I don't
of
understand.
The victorious Napoleon depict a strong leader, hand firmly in jacket.
How much money did they have to spend for all those dudes to guard him? Could have just chopped his head off. I don't get it.
Depictions of Napoleon
Nice that they didn't, though.
on St. Helena show a disheveled old
Whoa.
man, hand firmly in pants. He
Yeah,
had
we don't know
lost
what happened to him,
everything.
right? Like,
And by the way,
exactly.
he was only 46, so maybe it's
46.
about time you know what? You're doing all right, kid.
Finally.
Napoleon fought one last battle
I don't need more
while on the
negative
island. The
comments
battle
about me.
for
I'm
his
already pretty down on
reputation.
myself.
He spent hours writing his memoirs, espousing his achievements, recording his greatness, and turning himself and his story into a phenomenal legend. And in this battle, he certainly succeeded. His mark on history cannot be denied. After his defeat, the European monarchs had got to work restoring Europe to its traditional balance and reasserting their dominance.
Concert of
But after
Europe.
Napoleon had spread the influence of the French Revolution,
Yeah.
these returning monarchs would have a difficult time regaining their absolute control. France returned to the rule of the Bourbons, but it would go on to stage another revolution, and then another one. Reaction to
France
Napoleon's
doing
rule
France's
in
best,
places like Germany and
revolting.
Italy propelled forward the ideas and feelings of modern unity and nationalism.
Oh,
and his
Germany,
Napoleonic
Italy
code
uniting.
still remains the basis of law in various modern countries. the modern world owes a lot to Napoleon's legacy. He remains statistically possibly the greatest military general in history, and his revolutionary military tactics changed the face of warfare. He was the last truly great leader to both lead his armies in battle while retaining total political control over a vast empire. There's still hope for Joe Biden, but the man remains somewhat of an enigma, and we still aren't sure exactly what to make of him.
What happened to all those things he wrote?
Was he the champion of the French Revolution, spreading equality wherever he went, or did he betray it by making himself an absolute monarch and restricting certain liberties? Was he an ambitious and aggressive conqueror, hellbent on bringing Europe to its knees? Or was he simply defending himself against an aggressive Europe, hellbent on reducing his power? Some things will continue to be debated. Napoleon died at the age of 51.
That's what I was going to look up next.
But some believe he may have been poisoned. The British
so he stayed there for 5 years.
Coffin, inside a mahogany coffin, inside a lead coffin, inside another mahogany coffin. I guess this time, they wanted to make sure he stayed where they put him. In 1840, his remains were moved to Paris, where they now rest under the dome
I want to see
of
that.
Les Invalides. The man
That'd be
from
really
humble
cool to
origins,
want to
with huge
visit.
ambition, ruthless determination, immaculate skill on the battlefield, and a hefty dose of luck.
Why is his hand always like
to
in
make
his
mark
shirt
on history,
or pants?
Did just that.
Is he thinking
There
about the
is
Russian
no
leader still,
immortality,
Alexander?
he said, but the memory that is left in the minds of men. And in that sense, Napoleon knew he would live on forever. Oh, and to reiterate, he was definitely average height for the time.
Okay. So I'm not average height for the time, but I'm average height for the 1800s. I'm going to start saying that. Definitely go sub to Oversimplified, which at this point, I don't know exactly who isn't. I feel like everyone is subbed to them. And sub to me too if you want to see more stuff like this. I can always do more. Thanks for watching. See you next time. And thank you to the patrons of June. Drew's Argentinian Grandpa. I'm Bout a Nut. AryanAfterHours. Sussy Imposter does a little trolling. Zeffi. Poppy Drew Woo. Stormtrooper 501. Patrick C. Many 74. LuxembourgLover. Aaron F. Anthony G. Call of Tortoise. Dalton D. Elijah Senpai. EpiNick. Full Send. Kaylee K. And M203 BrushEm. Thank you.